Commander Jake Morrison stared out from the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant as massive alien vessels appeared around Earth's orbital stations. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen before, their sleek metallic hulls gleaming with an otherworldly light that seemed to bend space itself around them. Each vessel was easily 10 times larger than Earth's biggest warships, and their weapons arrays glowed with an ominous purple energy that made the hair on Jake's arm stand up. The communication screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Ambassador Krelthak, a tall reptilian creature with golden scales and piercing yellow eyes. His voice carried the weight of centuries as he spoke, each word dripping with condescension that made Jake's jaw clench in barely contained anger. "Primitive species of Earth," Krelthak began, his forked tongue flicking out between razor-sharp teeth. "I am Ambassador Krelthak of the Galactic Council, speaking on behalf of civilizations that have ruled the stars for over 50,000 years. You have been observed, studied, and found wanting in all measures of galactic citizenship." Jake felt his hands tighten into fists as the alien continued his speech. Behind him, his crew members exchanged worried glances, their faces pale with the realization of what was happening. Earth was being judged by beings they had never even known existed until this moment. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel a mere 50 years ago," Krelthak said with what Jake could only interpret as amusement. "In galactic terms, you are infants playing with toys you do not understand. Your primitive fusion engines, your basic plasma weapons, your crude understanding of space-time manipulation. All of this marks you as a species unworthy of independence." The alien's image grew larger on the screen as he leaned forward, his yellow eyes seeming to look directly at Jake despite the impossibility of such a thing. "Therefore, by the authority vested in me by the Galactic Council, I hereby deliver your final ultimatum. You will surrender all military assets within 72 Earth hours. You will accept vassal status under Council protection. You will submit to our guidance in all matters of technology, governance, and expansion." Jake wanted to speak, to tell this arrogant creature exactly what he thought of their ultimatum, but protocol demanded that only Admiral Lisa Carter could respond to such a formal declaration. The Admiral was currently aboard the alien flagship, having been summoned for what the Council had called negotiation talks, but which now seemed more like a sentencing hearing. "The alternative," Krelthak continued, his voice taking on a darker tone, "is complete annihilation. Our weapons can crack your planet like an egg, boil your oceans, and scatter your atoms across the void. We have done this before to species that refuse to acknowledge their proper place in the galactic order." The screen showed images of dead worlds, their surfaces scarred and lifeless, their once proud civilizations reduced to radioactive dust. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized these weren't threats or computer simulations. These were actual records of worlds that had dared to defy the Galactic Council. On the alien flagship, Admiral Lisa Carter sat in what could only be described as a courtroom, surrounded by representatives of dozens of different species. Each one looked down at her with the same mixture of pity and contempt that she had seen in Krelthak's eyes. The Andromedans with their crystalline bodies that rang like bells when they moved. The Centaurians with their multiple arms and heads that seemed to move independently of each other. The Vegan Collective, whose representatives appeared to be made of living liquid metal. "Admiral Carter," spoke the Council's supreme arbiter, a being so ancient that its species name had been forgotten by history. "You have heard our terms. Surely you understand that resistance is not only futile but completely irrational. Your species has had 50 years to develop space technology. We have had 50,000. The mathematics of this situation should be clear even to a primitive mind." Lisa kept her expression carefully neutral, though inside she was fighting to maintain her composure. These beings spoke about humanity the way humans might discuss bacteria in a petri dish, as something interesting but ultimately insignificant. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that humanity had spent those 50 years doing much more than just learning to travel between stars. Back on Earth, in a facility buried 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, Dr. Kevin Walsh monitored the alien transmission while his fingers flew across holographic controls. Around him, screens showed weapon systems that would have seemed like magic to the aliens currently threatening his homeworld. Quantum displacement cannons that could fire through folded spacetime. Consciousness transfer networks that allowed single humans to control entire fleets. phase shift generators that could make matter exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Doctor," his assistant called out, her voice tight with tension. "We're receiving the activation codes from the Pentagon. Project Lazarus is officially authorized." Kevin nodded grimly as he began the startup sequence for systems that had been decades in development. The aliens thought they were dealing with primitives who had stumbled onto faster-than-light travel by accident. They had no idea that humanity's rapid advancement wasn't luck or coincidence. It was the result of careful planning by people who had always known that this day would come. President Maria Rodriguez stood in the Oval Office, watching the alien ships through the window as they hung in Earth's sky like dark omens. Her advisors surrounded her, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and determination that she felt in her own heart. The decision she was about to make would either save humanity or ensure their complete destruction. "Madam President," her Secretary of Defense said quietly, "the alien deadline expires in 68 hours. Admiral Carter is still aboard their flagship. Our conventional forces are completely outmatched. Perhaps we should consider—" "No." Maria's voice cut through the room like a blade. "We don't negotiate with bullies, and we certainly don't surrender to them. Send the activation codes to all Project Lazarus facilities. It's time these aliens learned what happens when you threaten humanity." As the orders went out across secure quantum channels, hidden bases throughout the solar system began to hum with power. Weapons that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks started charging their exotic matter cores. Soldiers began suiting up in armor that made them individually more powerful than alien battle tanks. Ships that had been disguised as civilian transports shed their false hulls to reveal weapon systems that could crack moons. The Galactic Council had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that a young species would be weak, that rapid advancement meant shallow understanding, that 50 years wasn't enough time to develop truly dangerous technology. They were about to learn just how wrong they were, and the lesson would be written in the wreckage of their supposedly invincible fleets. Captain Amy Foster moved through the underground corridors of the Luna Base facility, with practiced silence, her footsteps muffled by the specially designed flooring that absorbed all sound. Behind her, a team of 12 specialists followed in single file, each one carrying equipment that would have been impossible to explain to any outside observer. The mission they were undertaking had been planned for over 30 years, waiting for exactly this moment when humanity would need to reveal its true capabilities. The elevator descended for what felt like hours, passing through layers of rock and metal that had been carefully excavated without any alien observers detecting the construction. Amy remembered the briefings about how every piece of equipment had been manufactured in complete secrecy, how entire factories had been built underground to avoid the scanning eyes of alien scout ships that had been monitoring Earth for decades. When the elevator finally stopped, Amy stepped out into a vast chamber that stretched beyond the limits of her vision. Rows upon rows of weapon systems lined the walls, each one humming with barely contained energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. At the center of the chamber stood Colonel Danny Wright, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic displays that showed weapon status readouts from similar facilities scattered throughout the solar system. "Captain Foster," Danny said without turning around, his eyes focused on the tactical displays. "Right on schedule. Are your teams ready for activation sequence Alpha?" Amy nodded as she approached the control station, her fingers already moving toward the biometric scanners that would begin the process of bringing humanity's most closely guarded secrets online. "All teams report ready, Colonel." Quantum displacement cannons are charged and standing by. Targeting computers have been locked onto Council fleet positions for the past 6 hours. Danny allowed himself a small smile as he watched the energy readings climb toward operational levels. The aliens orbiting Earth believed they were dealing with a species that had barely learned to split atoms for energy production. They had no idea that human scientists had been working with exotic matter and quantum mechanics for decades, developing weapons that operated on principles the Galactic Council had never even theorized about. "You know," Danny said as he initiated the final startup sequence, "when I was a kid, I used to wonder what it would be like to meet aliens. I imagined they would be wise and peaceful, ready to share knowledge and help us become better. Never thought they would show up to enslave us." Amy watched the weapon systems come online one by one, each activation sending a pulse of energy through the facility that she could feel in her bones. Maybe some of them are like that, Colonel. But these ones picked the wrong species to threaten. 3,000 miles away, in a facility buried beneath the Sahara Desert, Dr. Rebecca Stone stood before a bank of computers that connected directly to her brain through a network of fiber optic cables so thin they were nearly invisible. The consciousness transfer technology she had developed allowed human minds to interface directly with computer systems, controlling multiple units simultaneously with thought alone. What had started as a project to help paralyzed patients control robotic limbs had evolved into something far more significant. Rebecca closed her eyes and felt her consciousness expand as the neural interface activated. Suddenly, she could perceive dozens of combat drones positioned throughout the solar system, each one an extension of her own body. Through their sensors, she could see the alien ships hanging in space around Earth, their crews completely unaware that they were already being targeted by weapons they couldn't detect. "Dr. Stone," her assistant called out from across the laboratory, "we're receiving confirmation from all drone networks. 247 units are online and responding to mental commands. The pilots are reporting perfect synchronization." Rebecca opened her eyes for a moment to look at the status displays. Each dot of light represented a human consciousness linked to multiple combat drones, creating a coordination network that no alien military had ever encountered. When the attack began, the enemy would face opponents that moved with perfect unity, each pilot controlling dozens of units simultaneously, while sharing tactical information at the speed of thought. "Send confirmation to command," Rebecca said as she closed her eyes again and felt her awareness spread across space. "Consciousness network is fully operational and ready for combat deployment." In orbit around Jupiter, Captain Tony Blake sat in the command chair of the stealth ship Phantom, watching alien vessels through sensors that operated on principles the Galactic Council had never discovered. His ship and dozens like it had been operating undetected for years, mapping every alien installation within 50 light-years of Earth while appearing to be nothing more than asteroid mining operations. Tony studied the tactical display that showed the true scope of the alien forces arrayed against humanity. The ships currently threatening Earth were just a small fraction of the Galactic Council's military might, but they represented everything the aliens thought would be necessary to crush human resistance. The arrogance of that assumption would be their downfall. "Captain," his sensor operator called out quietly, "we're detecting massive energy buildups from the hidden bases. Looks like command is beginning activation of the primary weapon systems." Tony nodded as he reviewed the intelligence his ships had gathered over the years. Every alien vessel had been cataloged and analyzed. Their weapons capabilities, shield frequencies, crew complements, and tactical doctrines were all detailed in databases that would give human forces overwhelming advantages in the coming battle. The aliens had made the mistake of treating humans as primitives not worth watching carefully. "Signal all stealth units," Tony ordered. "Begin final positioning for Operation Thunderstrike. The aliens are about to learn why you should never threaten a species that conquered its own homeworld in the span of recorded history." Back on Earth, the countdown continued toward the alien deadline. In command centers around the globe, military leaders watched status displays that showed weapons and systems the public had never imagined existed. Quantum cannons that could fire through folded spacetime to strike targets instantly across vast distances. Drone swarms controlled by human minds linked through consciousness transfer networks. Stealth ships that had been gathering intelligence on alien forces for years without being detected. The Galactic Council believed they were giving humanity time to accept the inevitable. Instead, they were giving Earth's defenders time to prepare for a counterattack that would shatter every assumption the aliens had made about human capabilities. The species that the Council dismissed as primitive upstarts was about to demonstrate the kind of rapid innovation and brutal efficiency that had allowed them to dominate their homeworld in just a few thousand years of civilization. As the hidden weapons reached full operational status, one thing became clear to every human involved in the preparations. The aliens had made their ultimatum to the wrong species, and they were about to pay the price for their arrogance in ways they could never have imagined. The alien deadline expired at exactly 1200 hours Greenwich Mean Time, and Ambassador Krelthak waited aboard his flagship for the inevitable surrender message from Earth. Instead, space around the Galactic Council fleet suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of light as quantum displacement cannons fired from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The weapons materialized their deadly energy directly inside the alien ships, bypassing shields that had protected Council forces for thousands of years. Captain Ryan Kelly led the first wave of human fighters that appeared without warning inside the Council formation. His ship materialized just 50 meters from the alien flagship's command bridge, quantum engines allowing instantaneous travel through folded space that the enemy had never encountered before. Ryan's weapons fired continuously as he moved through the alien fleet, each shot precisely calculated to disable key systems rather than destroy the ships outright. The Galactic Council crew scrambled to respond to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Their sensors couldn't track human ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime, and their weapons couldn't lock onto targets that materialized and vanished faster than their tracking systems could follow. In the first 30 seconds of combat, 12 major alien vessels lost primary power and weapons systems to attacks they never saw coming, Lieutenant. Sarah Brooks sat in her consciousness transfer pod 3,000 miles beneath the surface of Earth, her mind controlling 47 combat drones simultaneously as they swarmed through the alien fleet. Each drone moved with perfect coordination, sharing targeting data and tactical information at the speed of thought. The alien pilots found themselves facing opponents that seemed to know their next move before they made it, their formations crumbling under attacks that came from impossible angles. Sarah could feel the confusion and panic spreading through the enemy ranks as her drones exploited weaknesses in alien battle tactics that had remained unchanged for centuries. The Council forces were trained to fight against opponents who followed predictable patterns, who announced their attacks with energy buildups that could be detected and countered. They had no experience fighting enemies who could strike without warning from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Lisa Carter watched the battle unfold from her position aboard the alien flagship, where she had been held during the so-called negotiations. The Council representatives, who had spoken to her with such condescension just hours before now, stared in shock at displays showing their supposedly invincible fleet being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't understand or counter. "This is impossible," whispered the Supreme Arbiter, his ancient voice cracking with disbelief. "Your species doesn't have this technology. Our scouts confirmed that you barely understand fusion power generation." Lisa allowed herself a cold smile as another alien battleship went dark on the tactical display. "Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Did you really think a species smart enough to achieve faster than light travel in 50 years would be stupid enough to show you our real capabilities?" The revelation hit the Council representatives like a physical blow. For thousands of years, they had relied on their technological superiority to maintain control over younger species. The idea that primitives could not only match but exceed their capabilities challenged everything they believed about galactic civilization. Major Chris Davis coordinated simultaneous strikes on 17 different Council strongholds, each attack demonstrating human weapons and tactics that shouldn't have been possible, according to the aliens' understanding of physics. On the fortress world of Kepler Prime, General Patricia Hill led ground forces equipped with personal shield generators and molecular disruptors that made each human soldier nearly invincible against conventional alien weapons. The Zephyrian defenders who had boasted about their impenetrable defenses found themselves facing enemies who could walk through plasma fire without injury and whose weapons could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. The orbital defense platforms that had protected Kepler Prime for over 10,000 years crumbled under assault from human weapons that fired through dimensional barriers. Patricia watched through her helmet display as alien fortifications that had never been breached simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered by technology that operated on principles the defenders had never imagined. General Hill to command, Patricia reported, as her forces advanced through the alien stronghold. "Kepler Prime defenses are neutralized. Resistance is collapsing across all fronts. The enemy appears to be in complete shock at our capabilities." Similar reports flooded in from battlefields across a dozen star systems as human forces demonstrated the true scope of their preparations. Captain Steve Parker led deep strike missions against Council supply bases that were supposed to be secret, his ships appearing without warning in systems the aliens thought were completely secure. Each successful attack sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council's command structure as they realized that humanity had been watching and planning for years. The Andromedans, who had considered the human situation a minor police action, now found their own border systems under attack by forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. Their crystalline warships, which rang like bells when they moved, were reduced to discordant noise as human weapons disrupted the harmonic frequencies that held their hulls together. Commander Julia Adams demonstrated humanity's phase shift technology, allowing her ships to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously and strike targets that believed themselves completely protected. Dr. Kevin Walsh monitored the global offensive from his command center beneath Colorado, watching as decades of secret preparation finally paid off. The quantum displacement cannons were performing exactly as designed, firing through folded space to strike targets instantly across vast distances. The consciousness transfer networks were giving human forces coordination advantages that no alien military could match. Most importantly, the phase shift generators were allowing human ships and weapons to operate on principles that the Galactic Council's science couldn't explain or counter. Doctor, his assistant called out over the sound of status reports, flooding in from across the galaxy. We're receiving surrender requests from 14 different council member species. They're asking for immediate ceasefire negotiations. Kevin nodded grimly as he watched the tactical displays showing human forces advancing on every front. The aliens had expected a quick surrender followed by peaceful occupation. Instead, they were facing the complete destruction of their military power by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The Galactic Council's ancient dominance was crumbling under the assault of human innovation and determination, and the shock of their defeat was spreading panic throughout civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. News of humanity's devastating counterattack spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization in council space. On the homeworld of the Andromedans, crystalline beings that had lived for thousands of years gathered in their resonance chambers, their harmonic voices creating sounds of pure terror as reports arrived describing the complete destruction of their border fleets. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos as representatives from dozens of species tried to understand how their supposedly invincible military forces had been crushed by primitives who had barely learned to travel between stars. The great assembly hall that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations now echoed with sounds of panic as ancient powers realized their millennia of dominance was ending. Council Admiral Veltar of the Centaurian Empire stood before the emergency assembly, his forearms trembling as he delivered reports that challenged everything the gathered species believed about galactic civilization. His multiple heads turned independently as he spoke, each one focused on different aspects of the tactical disaster that had befallen their forces. Honored representatives, Veltar began, his voice carrying the weight of military defeat. Our fleets have suffered losses that exceed 90% across all engaged sectors. The human forces demonstrated weapons technology that operates on principles our scientists cannot explain. They appear to possess the ability to fire through folded space-time, to control matter at the quantum level, and to coordinate their forces through some form of direct mental connection. The Vegan Collective representative, a being of living liquid metal that flowed and shifted as it spoke, interrupted with sounds that resembled breaking glass. This is impossible. Our intelligence networks confirmed that the humans possess only primitive fusion technology and basic plasma weapons. How could they develop such advanced capabilities without our knowledge? Admiral Veltar's expression grew even more grim as he accessed the tactical reports flooding in from across the galaxy. It appears that everything we observed about human technology was deliberately deceptive. Their ships that we classified as simple cargo vessels were actually advanced warships with stealth capabilities beyond our detection methods. Their mining operations in the outer system were covers for weapon construction facilities. They have been preparing for this conflict for decades, while allowing us to see only what they wanted us to see. On the Centaurian homeworld, panic spread through the population as word arrived that Captain Steve Parker's human forces had appeared without warning in their most secure star systems. The phase shift technology that allowed human ships to exist partially outside normal spacetime made them impossible to track or predict, and Centaurian defenses that had protected their civilization for 10,000 years crumbled in minutes. The reports kept coming, each one more shocking than the last. Commander Julia Adams had led her phase-shifted fleet through the heart of Andromedan space, her ships materializing inside asteroid fortresses that were supposed to be impregnable. The crystalline defenders found their harmonic weapons useless against enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their perfect coordination disrupted by human technology that operated outside their understanding of physics. Dr. Kevin Walsh revealed the final demonstration of human technological superiority when he activated the stellar destabilizer in an uninhabited system on the edge of Council space. The weapon that could cause stars themselves to collapse sent energy readings across the galaxy that made every Council scientist recalculate their understanding of what was possible. The message was clear without words. Humanity possessed the power to destroy entire solar systems if threatened. The demonstration had the intended effect across Council space as member species realized that continuing the conflict with humanity could result in their complete extinction. The Tau-Cedians, whose civilization had survived 3 galactic wars over 50,000 years, immediately withdrew all their forces from human space and sent desperate messages offering unconditional surrender. The Proxima Collective, known throughout the galaxy for their stubborn refusal to retreat, abandoned their positions and fled toward the galactic rim. Ambassador Krelthak found himself stripped of authority as his own government recalled him in disgrace. The Zephyrian High Command that had authorized the ultimatum to humanity now faced revolution, as their people learned that their leaders had nearly brought about their extinction through arrogance and miscalculation. Krelthak sat in his detention cell aboard what remained of his flagship, watching through the viewport as human ships moved through space with casual superiority. Council Admiral Veltar broke ranks when reports arrived that human forces had appeared in orbit around the Centaurian capital world. Rather than face the destruction of his homeworld, he transmitted an unconditional surrender directly to Admiral Lisa Carter and formally withdrew the Centaurian Empire from the Galactic Council. His action started an avalanche of defections as other species realized that their ancient alliance was not worth extinction. The Rigel Confederacy, the Sirius Republic, and the Vega Trade Union all followed the Centaurian example within hours, each one offering separate peace treaties with humanity while desperately trying to distance themselves from the Council's failed attempt to subjugate Earth, the great alliance that had controlled galactic civilization for thousands of years dissolved in panic as its member species turned on each other in their rush to appease the humans. On the Council capital world of Galactic Prime, emergency meetings devolved into chaos as representatives accused each other of intelligence failures and strategic incompetence. The Supreme Arbiter, whose species had guided galactic civilization for longer than recorded history, could only watch helplessly as the order he had spent millennia building crumbled before human technological superiority. The final blow came when Captain Tony Blake's stealth ships revealed themselves around Galactic Prime itself, having operated undetected in the heart of Council space for years. The revelation that humans had been watching and mapping the Council's most secret installations sent the remaining representatives into complete panic. Species that had worked together for thousands of years now viewed each other with suspicion, wondering what other intelligence the humans had gathered. As the last Council fleets either surrendered or fled toward unknown space, one truth became clear to every surviving alien commander. The galaxy had new masters, and they had announced their dominance with a demonstration of power that left no room for doubt or resistance. The age of the Galactic Council was over, and the era of human supremacy had begun with violence that would be remembered for millennia. 6 months after the complete collapse of the Galactic Council, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the Council's Grand Assembly Hall on Galactic Prime, now serving as headquarters for the newly established Human Peacekeeping Authority. The vast chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over 50,000 years now hosted representatives from species that came not as conquerors but as supplicants, begging for human protection from the chaos that had erupted across the galaxy. The irony was not lost on Jake as he watched former council members line up to request audience with human administrators. These same beings who had threatened to crack Earth like an egg now waited patiently for permission to speak, their ancient arrogance replaced by the desperate humility of the defeated. Ambassador Krelthak, once proud representative of the Zephyrian Empire, now served as a minor clerk in the Human Diplomatic Corps, his species having volunteered him for the position as penance for his role in threatening humanity. President Maria Rodriguez addressed the galaxy from the former council chambers, Her words broadcast across quantum communication networks that now carried human authority to every corner of known space. She stood behind the same podium where the Supreme Arbiter had once pronounced judgment on countless species. But her message was fundamentally different from the authoritarian decrees that had characterized council rule for millennia. To all species of the galaxy, Maria began, her voice carrying across space to billions of beings who hung on her every word. Humanity did not seek this position of leadership. We wanted only to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace. However, since the Galactic Council chose to threaten our existence, we have been forced to assume responsibility for maintaining order among civilizations that proved incapable of coexisting without oppression. The new rules that Maria announced represented a complete reversal of the hierarchical system that had governed galactic civilization for thousands of years. No longer would species be ranked by age or technological development. Merit and capability would determine standing in the galactic community, with respect for individual rights and planetary sovereignty serving as fundamental principles that could not be violated. Dr. Rebecca Stone's consciousness transfer technology revolutionized not just warfare but communication throughout the galaxy. The neural interface networks that had allowed human forces to coordinate with perfect precision during the war now enabled real understanding between species for the first time in galactic history. Beings who had been separated by biological and cultural barriers for millennia could now share thoughts and experiences directly, breaking down the prejudices that had fueled countless conflicts. The technology spread rapidly through space as human administrators established communication networks that allowed genuine diplomacy between civilizations that had previously been unable to understand each other's basic concepts. The Andromedans discovered that their harmonic language could be translated directly into human consciousness, while the liquid metal beings of the Vega Collective found they could share their fluid thought processes with solid-bodied species for the first time. Captain Amy Foster oversaw the establishment of human peacekeeping forces throughout former Council territory, her fleets maintaining order in systems where ancient rivalries had erupted into violence following the Council's collapse. The same weapons that had crushed Council forces now served to prevent wars between species that had been held in check only by their shared fear of the previous galactic government. The transformation was not without challenges, as some species struggled to accept the new reality of human dominance. The Rigel Confederacy attempted to form an alliance against human authority, only to discover that their potential allies were more afraid of human retaliation than they were interested in resistance. Captain Tony Blake's stealth ships appeared in orbit around Rigel Prime before the conspiracy could gain momentum, ending the rebellion without a single shot being fired. Colonel Danny Wright found himself serving as military advisor to species that had once possessed technologies far beyond human understanding, helping them adapt their forces to serve under human command. The quantum displacement cannons and phase shift generators that had shattered Council fleets now served as training tools, teaching alien military commanders about the new realities of warfare in the human age. What surprised many observers was humanity's restraint in victory. Rather than exploiting their overwhelming technological advantage to enslave other species, humans worked to establish systems that prevented the kind of oppression the Council had practiced. Dr. Kevin Walsh led scientific exchange programs that shared human knowledge with allied species, though always carefully maintaining humanity's decisive technological edge. The consciousness transfer networks created unprecedented cooperation between species as beings learned to literally see through each other's eyes. Ancient enemies discovered that their conflicts had been based on misunderstandings that dissolved when they could share experiences directly. The Tau-Cedians and the Proxima Collective, who had fought 3 wars over territorial disputes, found peaceful solutions within days of establishing neural communication links. Commander Julia Adams commanded exploration fleets that pushed into regions of space the Council had declared forbidden, discovering new civilizations that had hidden from galactic society for thousands of years to avoid Council oppression. These species emerged from isolation to find a galaxy transformed, where technological superiority did not automatically grant the right to dominate others. The most dramatic change came in how conflicts were resolved. The Council's method of imposing solutions through superior force gave way to human-mediated negotiations where disputes were settled through understanding rather than intimidation. Species that had spent millennia in bitter rivalry found themselves working together on projects that benefited entire sectors of the galaxy. Resident Rodriguez concluded her address with words that would define humanity's approach to galactic leadership for generations to come. We rule not because we enjoy power, but because we have proven capable of wielding it responsibly. The galaxy has known 50,000 years of rule by fear and oppression. Under human leadership, it will know peace through strength, justice through understanding, and progress through cooperation. As her words echoed across the galaxy, former council species began the long process of adapting to a new reality. The young species from Earth that had been dismissed as primitive upstarts now guided galactic civilization with wisdom born from the bitter experience of survival on a world where only the adaptive thrived. The Galactic Council's speechless shock had given way to grudging respect, and eventually to genuine appreciation for leaders who had proven that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build something better from the ashes of what came before.